All right, y'all. Thanks for holding for a sec. I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Christina Caesar, and I'll be moderating today's session. Today's webinar is a debrief on the latest updates and product releases that Microsoft announced in September at Ignite 2020 related to their productivity suite. So this is one of two webinars. Next week, we'll cover security, which we'll talk about. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded, and make sure to send any questions through the Q&A function in Teams. Just a little bit about us. Synergy Technical is an IT consulting firm headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We have clients in over 70 countries and all 50 states and manage over 2 million licenses of Microsoft 365 for our clients through licensing and managed services practices. We excel at securing a productive workforce in complex environments and have been recognized as such. Just this past February, we were awarded the Microsoft 365 Security Deployment Partner of the Year Award. A large part of that success is the work done by today's presenter, Adrian Amos. So Adrian is a deep-level Microsoft security expert that runs hands-on workshops around the nation where end users experience the cybersecurity capabilities of Microsoft's EMS suite. Today's webinar is actually fitting for Adrian. He's had the honor of running both productivity and security workshops at Microsoft Ignite for the past 2 years. So he seems like perfect person to be leading today's webinar. And Adrian, with that, I will hand it off to you.
All right, thank you so much, Christina. Pleasure to be with everybody today. Let me know when you can see my screen, please.
Yep, you are there.
Fantastic, thank you. So yeah, 2 years of doing security and productivity presentations at Ignite, and I was super duper bummed out to miss it this year. Not least of which was because, well, I haven't been to New Orleans in quite some time, but I guess nobody else went there either. But today is actually going to be a little bit of a shift for me, because as much as I love going through and doing hands-on and showing you the exact things that, how they work and where they work, a lot of this stuff isn't GA yet, which means I don't have it in my demo tenant. I don't have it in my real life tenant. So we are going to be living off of PowerPoint. Please don't hate me. And that also means that because it doesn't exist in my tenant, I can't produce my own content around it. So I'm kind of reliant on some of the things that Microsoft has already published in this space. So you're going to see a little bit of different type of content today from what I usually like to present. I'm really hopeful we can get back onto solid footing with actually going through and touching things very soon. So without further ado, I think it's safe to say the biggest announcement space in all of the Ignite stuff was around Teams, right? Everybody's working from home. We've seen Teams kind of lag behind some of the other products that existed in the collaboration space a little bit. Time to catch up. So there's been a lot of announcements here. Most of the things that I'm going to talk about today were announced at Ignite. Some of them were building on things that had already been in play, and some of them are actually, even one of them has already come out since Ignite. So, cloud speed, nothing ever slows down. So hopefully we're going to be able to capture kind of where we've come over the last several months, but looking at it from the perspective of announcements at Ignite. So again, most of what was announced at Ignite around productivity was Teams. In fact, they published an Ignite Book of News. You can go and bing that Ignite Book of News. You can Google it too. It works just fine. And actually, you'll see that the largest subsection of announcements was all around Teams. We're going to not exhaust this slide as we go through, so I'm not going to speak to what's on here, but there's a whole lot, and it is a much larger list than what you'll see in any other product space. So the biggest one, the most obvious one, the one that has gotten everybody excited for the longest time, or kind of teased back over the summer, is the large gallery mode. Right now we can actually see 49 participants, 7 by 7. When Microsoft was when we first started going home back in March, this was kind of limited to 2 by 2, right? We could see 4 people. Zoom got there much faster than Microsoft did, and so the #1 user voice request in all of Teams world was, we want more people. And we got 3 by 3 back over the summer. But when they did 3 by 3, this was actually kind of neat. This is the first kind of clue that something was big. They actually only marked the user voice as partially complete and teased that one day we were going to get 7 by 7. You have this exists today, but for users to get it, you actually have to go in to the Teams settings and actually enable the new meeting experience. So just be aware that some users may say, hey, why am I not seeing it? They may not have that button turned on. So that's going to be really important. But the nice thing about that new meeting experience too is that we now are going to have multi-window support. So you can actually have a meeting over here while you're doing other stuff over here. Again, this isn't new to Ignite, but it's one of those things that a lot of people miss when they're kind of trying to enable some of the later features or most recent features of Teams. But we also have, and this is where I have to apologize for using somebody else's content here, right? We also have together mode, and this is giving us the ability to actually see all of the people who are in our meetings, not just in the Brady Bunch format, but actually in a shared meeting space. And I got to tell you, we first thought this was kind of a silly gimmick, right? And we turned it on for a couple of meetings and we gave each other, virtual high fives and whatnot. But I got to tell you, it really actually does reduce meeting fatigue, right? Because now I am actually looking at my coworkers the way that I would look at my coworkers if we were in a unified space. And it's just kind of helped make it a little bit easier to communicate with people. And I got to tell you, I mean, if you haven't turned it on, it's worth doing. This so far is working, I think, in almost every format. So I think if you can get to a Teams meeting, you can see it. It may be a little bit limited on some of the mobile views, but highly recommend play with Together mode. But Together mode's about to get even better because now we're going to be very soon seeing all these new collaborative spaces too, right? So, if sitting in the boardroom is what you want to do, well, you'll be able to sit in the boardroom fairly soon. Or if you want to be sitting in an auditorium or whatever, then that's fantastic too. Now, some of these things will and won't scale quite so well, right? We actually have the ability now to have up to 1,000 people in a meeting. I can't imagine that you're going to really want to do a Together mode for 1,000 people, but we can always hope that maybe in Ignite 2021, we'll see Teams Stadium mode where we'll be able to take the stage as a band and not all the participants sit in the audience so they can cheer for us. We can hope for that. But we also now have not just these gigantic meeting spaces, right, and the collaborative view or Together mode, but we can actually now also do custom layouts for how our Teams meetings work. And this is where I'm really excited to see, because the challenge that we get into in traditional meetings, and even what we're having to deal with right now, is that I can put content up on the screen, but then everybody becomes a little line of people at the bottom, right? Or I can go into focus mode and then the people go away entirely and I'm looking at the content. But you lose some of the presentation that goes along. I mean, see, I'm handsy, right? I want to have my hands up in the space, and I get excited. I want to actually say, maybe over here we've got this thing going on. Well, the way it's done now, I can't do that. I have to wiggle the mouse and hope that you can see it, or remember how to turn on the highlighter thing down here, or whatever. No, very soon we're going to have the ability to actually see a list of the people stacked up on the side where they take up less space, and it makes sense to have them there. And then actually overlay some of the, our stuff in our presentations. But you got to be careful with this, right? Because if you look at the way that our PowerPoint slides are built, I am sitting exactly where my company logo would be. So it may be worth going back and looking at your corporate, profiles or defaults and templates and all that fun stuff and make sure they're going to work well in this space. But I am super duper jazzed about the ability to do custom layouts and meetings. And we finally are getting breakout rooms. Another one where Teams has been super late to the party, but we're actually now going to have the ability to do breakout rooms for presenters to reach across all breakout rooms and actually post a broadcast announcement to close those meeting rooms and bring people back into a unified space again. So we're finally getting on board with that. Massively overdue. Super excited about this one too. And when we deal with these large meetings, right? A lot of times, in our business, as a consulting business, when we're having conversations with a customer around, let's say, a discovery process or a sales process, and we're trying to capture what it is that the customer actually really wants to achieve, there's salespeople involved. And I love you guys to death, but, sometimes notes get transposed and from what the customer really said they wanted to what the salesperson thought they heard. It plays the telephone game. We've had for a while the ability to record calls and get transcriptions out of those recordings, but now we actually get one-to-one speaker attribution. So if Bob up in the corner said, I'm looking to achieve this, then it's going to say in the list of notes, Bob, and it's going to have a timestamp for that note. And that is going to be revolutionary, not just because in our industry, we're trying to make sure we attribute the right statements to the right people, right? Maybe it was somebody in the marketing team who suggested the idea, but they're not really a decision maker, right? Well, now we're going to have that attribution. But from an inclusivity perspective, if you have members of your team who are deaf, hard of hearing, need additional assistance to understand who's speaking, this is going to really improve people's abilities to follow what's actually happening in a meeting, to keep up with notes, and all this is going to be recorded. It's all going to be available in the meeting recap and all that fun stuff that comes later. And meeting notes, right? So this is one that I completely missed earlier in the year. It used to be that when you wanted to do meeting notes, you actually spun up a OneNote notebook. And that was always kind of a stumbling block for me as I would go out and present Microsoft Teams, because the demo environments that I have for my immersion experiences would not automatically sign people into OneNote. So it was a little bit of a ham-fisted effort to try to get people into the shared meeting notes. Well, as of earlier this year, I don't know what date, but whenever it was that Microsoft lit up the new meeting experiences button, hint, go back and look at that, make sure it's lit up. New meeting experiences take take notes in a wiki tab. And that's pretty cool, because that means that I don't have to use that sledgehammer of a solution OneNote from my finishing nail of a problem taking notes from the meeting. And it also means now that more people have access to it. So initially, up until about a week ago, you could only get 20 people into those notes. Well, now by default, 100 people can see the notes, which means they can also participate in the notes. And it's not limited to just the 100 people, the first 100 people. It's actually just a default setting. So user 101 comes in, they want to get access to the notes. They just hit a one-click request access. They'll be able to get access to the notes, and nobody loses that access for it. So you can scale up your note takers as big as you want. Obviously, there may be some reason why you want to keep that fairly low so that you don't have a million people contributing to that wiki all the time. But 100+ participants, it's a wiki now. It's a simple tab with formatable text. It's not big, complicated, overwrought tools being brought into this. And, oh, I mentioned it already, but coming back to it, meeting recaps. So this is really mind-boggling, right? So for one of the things that has made meetings work and work well has been persistent chat. So when a group of users have a meeting and anybody drops something into the chat, you know, whether it's a note or a file or whatever, that gets saved not just within the context of the meeting itself, but if the meeting was held in a Teams channel, anybody can click back to that spot where the meeting happened and see the text of the chat persistent in the chat of the channel. That makes sense. So you can always look back at what was being said at that time without having to go back and watch a recording, is really what I'm getting at. That has now been expanded. So now it's what was in the chat, what were the details of the meeting, who were the participants, is there a transcription, are there meeting notes? All this fun stuff is now brought together into a single meeting recap that's delivered to all the participants, everybody who missed the meeting, and blow your mind, it actually will also append this to the Outlook object in every participant's Outlook. So in the calendaring space, they're actually not even going to have to open Teams to get into this meeting recap. It's going to be right there. They're going to be able to get all this stuff however they came to the meeting. And again, it'll be persistent too. So they'll be able to go back to it and get all this fun stuff too. So if somebody even dropped like, you know, like a whiteboard or a poly or whatever in there, those things will also be captured in the meeting. No longer do you have to worry about, I shared my file up and it took Bob's file down and now there's no record that Bob's file was shared. It's just mine. That's all captured and it's all going to be persistent. Love it. Moving out of the meeting space a little bit, right, we are also going to have some pretty cool controls around webinars and reporting. So if you need your meetings to go kind of bigger, a little bit less participation driven, a little bit more like what we're doing right now, you know, traditionally we've had to either rely on third-party products or use some other tool that would bring you into a Teams environment. Microsoft is very famous for this internally with all their big events. Are actually, they have this middleware that sits between the user registration and the actual Teams event. So we're kind of scrapping all that now. We can actually do direct registration and direct reporting now directly out of Teams. And this is going to be really cool because some of these capacities in Teams are getting ridiculous, right? So I mentioned that we can do up to 1,000 active participants in a meeting. We can actually scale that beyond 1,000. For view-only participants now can go all the way to 20,000 people. 20,000 people participating in a single Teams meeting. Everybody beyond user 1001, again, view only, but they'll get all the same cool stuff that comes along with everything else too. They'll get the transcription, they'll get the meeting recap, they'll get all the fun stuff. They just won't be able to participate, with like audio and video and all that fun stuff. They'll see it, they won't be able to add anything to it. So meetings, wow, totally revamping the entire meeting concept, right? I mean, all these new users, all these new functionalities, I'm super excited to start playing with them. I'm really hoping that they'll come to my tenants very soon because I want to start playing. But calling didn't get forgotten either, right? So if you've used Teams calling out of the native app, it's a little bit clunky trying to move from one screen to the other to figure out how all the things interrelate. Microsoft has unified that experience now, so the dial pad's no longer hiding off down in the corner somewhere, hoping that you'll find it, and all your relevant buttons and important things are now kind of raised up to a point where they're much easier to find. Your voicemails are now seen in stream with your recent calls and all that fun stuff. So like much cleaner UI in the actual calling experience. But that's not where I'm really excited. Where I'm excited is this one, collaborative calling. We are now going to have the ability to take a call queue and embed it directly into a Teams channel. So this is kind of the first time where we've seen calling step out of the shadow of being like it's an add-on product to it's an actual integrated component of the Teams experience. So we're now going to be able to take a call queue, like I said, drop it directly into a Teams channel, and then people who are in that channel will actually be able to handle the queue in like a HR hotline or even an IT help desk, where they'll be able to share information and see things that are going on with their calls, with their other efforts and activities, but also be able to process calls in this queue. And because it's in a team, the team owner will have the ability to control the settings on that call queue. So adding users to the queue, removing users to the queue, you can stop thinking about that as an IT function and start letting the business holders or the business owners start worrying about that. That's where I'm excited. And we finally started getting some love for the first line workers, right? So WalkieTalkie for Android is now available, and we're starting to see some integrations now for actual people in the field with a collaborative effort between Microsoft and a company called RealWare to allow hands-free devices to integrate directly into Teams calling or Teams meetings. So that's pretty cool too. And the one that I think is probably going to make a few people sit up and notice is that we actually are getting approvals natively into Teams. So approvals are going to be a function of Power Automate. So there's actually a whole host of things that are coming from the Power Platform, but I am not an expert in that, so I kind of tended to stay away from it a little bit. But Power Automate is giving us an approvals function that we're going to be able to embed natively into Teams chats, channels, whatever. And we're going to actually be able to tie in Adobe and DocuSign to these processes too. So we're going to be able to look at an approvals dashboard, see all the things, the status of the approval. We're going to be able to set conditions on them, right? Do whatever we want to do. We're going to be able to elevate approval requests right out of chat and vice versa. So however we want to do these, it certainly, sky's the limit on this. This is really exciting stuff. Approvals have been a big sticking point right here for Teams collaboration for a while. And we also got the integration of Microsoft Lists. Now, I'm going to confess, again, there are a few collaboration tools in the Microsoft space where I struggle to see where one differentiates itself from another. Many people know that I am not a huge SharePoint person. That's okay. Don't hold it against me. I won't hold it against you. But Microsoft has now given us another tool that we can use to track tasks or objects or whatever we want, and it is Microsoft Lists, right? So that is actually legitimately basically just SharePoint lists, but now we can elevate them and dump them directly into Teams and Teams channels. So if Planner is not your jam, you can use lists. And that's kind of where I'm kind of falling back to, is I'm personally mentally trying to wrap my head around why I would use one instead of the other, but that's your business decision, not mine. So have at it. List is coming in, and you're going to be able to do it mobile and in the big app, and sky's the limit for you. There's also plenty of other stuff within Teams, right? So from an administrative perspective, I mentioned 1,000 users active in a meeting, and I mentioned 20,000 participants, in view only, but we can put 25,000 people in a team now, right? I mean, Microsoft has been trying for a long time to help organizations understand the concept of the inner circle and the outer circle, and how you communicate from one to the other. Like, inner circle being your direct peers, and your outer circle kind of being the company as a whole. But companies have pushed back on that and said, no, if Teams is the thing, I want to use only Teams. So now we can, like I said, put 25,000 people in a single team. The chat for that's not going to be your friend, but that's okay. You'll be able to control who can chat and who can't. We can also, though, on the back end now do bulk assignments of policy, and that, wow, mind blowing, right? If you've ever had to try to go through and assign something so simple as a calling plan, or rules of a calling plan, you used to have to go and do these things like onesie twosie. Now we can actually do bulk assignments. I'm jazzed about it. We can also now add a ton of new things to the dock, the left-hand column over here, right? SharePoint home sites coming soon, right? I wanted to show it to you, but it's not there yet. And Yammer communities, while you can put that there today, you're now very soon going to actually be able to see notifications on Yammer communities popping up. So that's kind of exciting, right? Because this will actually start getting a little bit of live content there. It's not just going to be a static link for you to click on. And yes, finally, we are also getting Teams templates. We're going to be able to make custom templates, clone existing teams into a template, or choose from sets of predefined templates that can have up to 15 channels and 50 separate apps and 20 separate tabs per channel. So really excited there. Totally worth checking that out if you get a chance. But then they also decided to bring a few things for those of us who actually have to go to the office. I'm in the office, but that's okay. We got some really cool things coming for our space as well. So room capacity notifications, right? Obviously, we are not past the pandemic yet. We still need to worry about the number of people that are collaborating in any given space. We're actually going to now be able to use Teams room meeting Teams meeting room cameras with AI to determine where and how many people are in that space, and whether or not we're over an administratively defined capacity. So this is one of the things that I've been talking about for a long time, right? Admins have long been able to set in a meeting room how many people are allowed to be in that space. And one of the really lesser utilized functionalities of meeting rooms and capacity is that when you search for an available meeting room, it should not deliver back to you a meeting room that's capacity is less than the number of people on your invite list, right? So if you have an invite list that has 20 people in the capacity of your only meeting of your meeting rooms, you have a 19 and a 21, it should only show you the 21. Well, now admins are going back and they're reducing that capacity for social distancing purposes. We're now going to not just have the Outlook calendar not suggest you use that room, but if you actually put 20 people in that room, it's going to actively alert you that you have too many people in that room, which is super cool. But in addition to that, we're also getting touchless experiences. So now you're going to actually be able to go into your meeting with just your phone or whatever device you choose. You're going to be able to do things without touching all the equipment. Teams casting, well, currently, right, that's working from mobile. It's coming soon to PC. Proximity join on Surface Hubs. So if you go into one and you just say, hey, I want to start working with, whatever equipment, it's not going to start showing you all the devices all the way down the hallway. So hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier to pick the right device to work with. We're actually going to start seeing that Microsoft is working with hardware vendors now to produce Cortana powered Teams panels. So, you go into a really cool, super slick office building that shows you the name of the conference room and whether or not it's available for the next 3 hours. That's actually coming to being an integrated Teams capability. And then also we're going to be able to now integrate Teams rooms equipment with Surface hubs. So if you come rolling into a Teams meeting room with a Surface hub and everything's talking to each other the way it's supposed to be, it will automatically detect that one of those devices that's in that room should be used for the meeting room space, and one should be used for other stuff like whiteboarding. So you won't have to go in and define what all the roles of these things are. It's just going to work it out for you, help you maximize your screen real estate and give you the best meeting experience possible. Teams got a lot, right? But it's not the only thing that got a lot. And I have a little bit less content on this, but this is kind of the other main area where we really need to start thinking about, right? So Stream has had a long and interesting history as a product. And its history bears witness to the fact that video itself has had a long evolution as a business tool. We used to have Office 365 video as a service. Then we got Stream as a service. And for a while, the two kind of sat side by side and each had its strengths, but working with Stream is great because when you record a meeting, it automatically goes to Stream. Well, Microsoft has kind of recognized that video possibly as a result of the work environments of 2020 is a critical business tool. It's not just a nice to have anymore. And because it's a critical business tool, it needs to be a little bit closer to the rest of the Office 365 suite. It needs to be brought into the fold a little bit more as a primary data stream. So forgive the use of Stream as a name and Stream as a data type, but it is finally being embraced now as a legitimate data stream. And to that end, Microsoft has recognized that the framework they built for it wasn't really appropriate for using it in that way. So they've gone back to the drawing board and they've completely reinvented Stream. And it looks now a lot more like our other Microsoft 365 connected spaces. So, you know, if you're used to going into the portal and looking at Delve or any other things that are there, we're actually going to get a lot more of a similar appearance and style to how that space has worked in the past. And again, so I mentioned that our meeting notes and our meeting recordings go to Stream. Well, now we're actually going to have this indexed and searchable transcript function that's now a native capability and not something that's just kind of being forklifted onto it. But we're also going to get much better mobile device support for Stream. So that's going to be really important because the biggest and most important improvement to this space is that we're now actually going to get legitimate video analytics. And this is one where I've been banging the drum for honestly probably 4 years or longer. I mean, honestly, since Office 365 video, right? One of the challenges that we have when we onboard new users is that we expect them to be trained on certain things. And that often means assigning them video content to watch. And then we want to be able to know that they've watched the video, right? So we've gotten around this by doing crazy things like asking a question that you would only know the answer to if you got to minute 4 and 57 seconds, right? No, we don't have to do that now. We're actually going to be able to get analytics off our videos. Did user A watch it? How much did they watch it? When did they watch it? How much time did they spend going through videos? We're gonna get real analytics after years of begging for it. And we're also going to get, because it is now a primary data stream in the Office 365 space, we're going to get the ability to do sharing and permissions much more cleanly, much more natively. You're going to notice that this does look an awful lot like the way we do things in SharePoint. Not going to be a big surprise, right? So sharing permissions on data streams. If you've done streams in the past, you'll know that the permissioning on it was really, really vexing. This is going to be a big improvement in terms of how we can actually make sure that we're collaborating appropriately and that the right folks are able to get to our content. So I'm excited about that one. And then, so kind of closing the door on the actual productivity tools a little bit and moving a little bit toward the admin side. Again, this is productivity, I swear. I'm not going to touch on any security stuff this week. we actually have seen improvements in Microsoft's productivity score. So this was a tool that was brought out at Ignite 2019. Last one I got to go to, and it gave us the ability to see what a user's experience should be of the Office 365 tool set, right? So it would show you kind of what they were using and all that fun stuff. You know, were you getting the penetration? We've added some stuff to it. We now have kind of renamed some functionality, right? So now we have a teamwork. How are users actually working together? What are the types of collaborative efforts that they're doing in that space? We're actually got now separate telemetry on meetings. How are people using their meetings? Are they using video in their meetings? How many people are doing instant meetings? I mean, it's really kind of getting a little bit more granular. But the two areas are actually Office 365 apps health. So we got that too, right? But we also, that was the one. The areas that we got the biggest improvements are we actually now have a network connectivity and apps health. So that's, pardon me for skipping ahead there. These two things are going to give you a better insight into users. Are they experiencing network lag, or is there something wrong with the application itself? And that, for people working from home, is going to be huge. So no longer are we shooting in the dark and saying, well, it's probably just a network issue. We're actually going to get real insights into that now, which, you know, is going to be super useful because people are now suggesting that a lot of folks may be working from home more permanently, or at least for another year or so. So I think we're going to see some continued investments in that space, but it's really going to be very, very helpful for helping understand what your help desk volume is and how best to triage the problems that you get out of that space. So that's kind of where I saw the biggest improvements in Microsoft's productivity offerings this year at Ignite. There were plenty more to choose from, but a lot of them were very product specific or dug too deep into a little area of a subset of features. But next week, I'm excited because we're going to be pivoting and talking about the security offerings that have come out and Microsoft's increased investment in the future of identity management. And I really do hope, I really do hope you'll join me for next week, because I am super excited. I mean, like, as much as I love the productivity side, this is my jam. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Christina. And if there are any questions, I'm sure she's equipped to handle that.
Thanks, Adrian. There are no questions currently in the Q&A chat, so if anyone wants to pop any in there, please feel free to. I actually had a question. I didn't know, Adrian, the WalkieTalkie feature was coming out. Is that only for Android, or are they putting that for iPhone as well at some point?
That's a good question. The product release that I read was titled WalkieTalkie for Android. I cannot imagine that Microsoft would position it for a single mobile device technology, but I'm an Android guy, so I didn't look farther than that. But yeah,
yeah,
I can get that information.
Yeah, Team iPhone. I was just saying, for first line workers, it's great, but I was just thinking about at conferences and trade shows and stuff when, you know, our team is constantly, I thought it'd be fun to use. But yeah, so does anyone else have any questions? Anything they want to ask? Maybe. So you will be receiving a recording of this webinar that you will also be able to access on our website. And the second series, so this was productivity today, obviously. Security will be next Thursday, same time, and you can register for that on our website. And I will also include the URL in the thank you email that you get for attending. So I think that's all I've got. But Adrian, if you don't have anything else, thank y'all for joining us, and hopefully see you next week. Security is way more fun.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.